Welcome to Stories of Brave Mothers, a channel dedicated to telling real and touching stories of brave mothers from around the world.
How far would a mother go when her children's lives are on the line? This is the story of Elena, a brave mother who defied the impossible. She crossed the desert, faced fear, thirst, and the unknown, all for love, with no documents, no guarantees, and no time. She had to choose, wait, or act. What happened on that journey will move you deeply, because this isn't just a story about immigration. It's a story about courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable love of a mother who refused to let fate take her children. Summer of 2014. The sun scorched the cracked earth of northern Mexico without mercy, where the land seemed to cry for help, and the wind carried stories most people would rather forget. In the border town of San Luis Rio, Colorado, where the line dividing two countries was almost invisible, lived Elena Marquez, a brave mother with a heart aching from longing and eyes that held the unwavering resolve of someone who never gave up. Elena was 38 years old and had two teenage sons, Javier, 17, and Mateo, 16. The three of them had only been reunited a few months earlier, after years apart due to circumstances she could no longer control. When her boys were little, Elena had crossed into the United States in search of opportunity, with the promise that she would return for them as soon as she had something solid to offer. She worked as a housekeeper in Arizona, scrubbing bathrooms that looked like palaces compared to the life she had left behind. She sent money, wrote letters, and counted the days until their reunion. But that reunion came wrapped in tragedy. Elena's mother, who had been caring for the boys, suffered a stroke and was left with lasting impairments. Elena had to leave her job temporarily and return to Mexico to take care of her family. It was supposed to be just for a few weeks. But weeks turned into months, and the months dragged on like sand in the desert. Meanwhile, the city around them was crumbling. San Luis was no longer what it once had been. Cartels had taken over the streets. Young people were being recruited, threatened, or simply vanished. A silent curfew had been imposed by fear. The local government, weakened and ineffective, could no longer guarantee even the most basic safety. It was on one of those tense nights that Elena heard the words that would steal her sleep, straight from Javier's mouth. "Mom, they approached me. They want me to do them a favor. Take a package to the border." Her heart nearly stopped. "Who are they?" she asked, trying to stay calm. "Them, the guys who run things here now. If I say no, they'll come after Mateo. That's what they told me." Elena felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. Suddenly, it wasn't about financial stability anymore. It wasn't about comfort. It was life or death. That very night, without thinking twice, she decided she had to get her sons out as soon as possible. But there was a problem. The legal process to bring them into the United States was slow, tangled in red tape, and uncertain. Even though she lived legally in Yuma, Arizona, there was no way she could reunite with her sons quickly without risking everything. The only real option, though far from easy, was to take them with her through an alternate route, crossing the desert stretch between San Luis and Arizona, far from the eyes of anyone who might stop them. This wasn't a clandestine crossing with coyotes and dangerous promises. It was an escape, a survival plan. She studied maps, listened to stories from others who had made the journey, gathered supplies, and decided they would go on their own. The next morning, she quietly began preparing everything. She bought lightweight backpacks, bottles of water, basic food, sturdy sneakers. She taught her sons how to protect themselves from the sun, how to ration water, how to stay focused even when it hurts. "We're going to walk through the desert for a while. It's going to be hard, but it'll be worth it." Mateo looked at her, eyes wide. "Through the desert. Mom, we're not gonna make it." "Yes, we will. Because we're going together, and because there's no other way. She tried to smile. She couldn't, but her eyes said it all. It wasn't courage she felt. It was urgency. On their last night in San Luis, the three of them slept huddled together on the floor of the house. The electricity had already been cut off, and the distant sound of gunfire was a constant reminder that time was running out. At dawn, they put on light-colored clothes, tied their shoelaces tight, and slipped out quietly through the back. There were no goodbyes. No one left to say goodbye to. The desert was waiting. The first hours of walking were bearable. The sun hadn't reached its peak yet, and the silence around them felt almost comforting compared to the sirens and threats of the past few weeks. Javier led the way, guided by a simple compass. Mateo, quieter, walked beside his mother, eyes scanning the horizon as if hoping to spot salvation rising out of nowhere. But of course, the desert shows no mercy. By midday, the heat had soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The sand burned, their feet ached, and thirst began to sink its teeth in. Water had to be rationed. The backpacks began to feel heavier than they were. The silence became oppressive. Time ceased to exist, but Elena never showed fear, even with cracked lips, eyes squinting against the sun, and an exhausted body. She pressed on, one step after another, and whenever one of her sons slowed down, she would say, "Look ahead. Every step takes us further from danger. We're almost there." By the end of the first day, they found shelter under a rocky ledge. There, they slowly shared a single can of corn between the three of them. Javier was shaking from the cold. The blistering heat had given way to a cutting, icy wind, as if the desert was mocking them. Elena took off her jacket and wrapped it around him, even though she herself was freezing. "You should wear it, Mom. I'm a grown-up. I've been through worse." It was a lie. She had never gone through anything like this before. But a brave mother learns to lie to protect, learns to mask pain, learns to invent strength when all that's left is darkness. That night, no one really slept. Every sound felt like a threat, every shadow, a risk. But there was also something silent and powerful between them, an unbreakable bond. There, under the stars, surrounded by invisible dangers, their love only grew, and it was that love that pushed their tired bodies into one more step forward. The second day was even crueler. Water supplies dropped to dangerous levels. Mateo got lightheaded. Javier nearly twisted his ankle on uneven ground, but Elena stayed on her feet. Her feet were bleeding inside her sneakers. Her head was pounding, but she knew she couldn't stop, because this wasn't just a journey. It was the only chance to save her children. And when, at the end of that second day, they spotted a barbed wire fence dividing the emptiness into two distinct territories, Elena dropped to her knees and cried for the first time. It wasn't the end of the journey, but it was the beginning of something new. The crossing was nearly complete. She looked at her boys, eyes full of tears and heart overflowing. "You have no idea how much I love you." They didn't answer. They just held her tight, as if that hug were the only safe place left in the world. And this was only the beginning. The second day in the desert had been merciless, and although the sight of the border fence had sparked a flicker of hope, Elena knew that didn't mean relief, and it certainly wasn't victory. It was just another obstacle, perhaps the most symbolic one, in the path of a brave mother who refused to let her sons be swallowed by violence. When night fell, bringing with it a cutting cold, the three of them huddled beneath a tarp Elena had improvised into a shelter. There was no fire, no more food, and the water, reduced to just a few drops in a single bottle. Mateo, the youngest, was trembling. Javier tried to stay composed, but Elena could see it. He was forcing himself to be strong, trying to protect her, the way sons sometimes try to protect their mothers, even when they don't know how. In that darkness, every desert sound seemed louder. Coyotes howled in the distance. Insects buzzed too close. And there was always that subtle fear of crossing paths with someone, whether it was a patrol or an armed stranger. The risk felt the same. Elena stayed awake most of the night, her eyes swollen, lips cracked, body drained. But her heart burned like a lit fire. Every time she thought of giving up, she looked at her sons and remembered. The danger they were fleeing was still greater than what they faced here. At sunrise, they started walking again. The third day would be decisive. With slow, heavy steps, they moved through dry brush, sharp stones, and heat that rose fast. Elena could feel her feet burning inside her shoes. The soles were worn down, and every step stabbed like a needle. At one point, Matteo collapsed to his knees. "Mom, I'm dizzy." She rushed to him, held him tight, and pulled the last bottle from her backpack. Just 3 fingers of water left. Elena didn't hesitate. "Drink it. Slowly. It's all yours," Javier protested. "Mom, you need some too." "I drank yesterday. I'm fine." It was a lie, but the kind of lie only mothers know how to tell. Matteo drank slowly, the water trembling in his dusty hands. Elena gently ran her fingers through his hair, sweaty and covered in dirt. "Just hang in there a little longer, sweetheart. We're close, I promise." But deep down, she didn't know if that was true. There was no GPS, no phone signal, just a vague sense of direction, guided by instinct. The sun, and a faith that couldn't be allowed to die. The sun hit its peak, and pain became part of the body. Their feet left blood marks in the sand. The backpacks were empty. The air felt heavier with every step. Suddenly, Javier pointed into the distance. "There's something out there? Looks like a structure." Elena squinted. A tower. Small, metallic, almost invisible. Maybe a surveillance post. Maybe an old checkpoint. But it was something. A sign of civilization. And that was all they needed. With the last of their strength, they walked toward it. But the desert, treacherous as always, tests everyone who dares to cross it. Just a few meters from the structure, they heard a sound that froze all 3. An engine. Loud. Close. Way too close. They dropped instinctively behind a rock. Elena pulled her sons in tight against her chest, as if her body alone could shield them. "Duh! Stay still. Don't breathe loud." The vehicle passed slowly. A dark pickup truck. Unmarked. It wasn't Border Patrol. It wasn't help. It was something else. Someone who didn't want to be seen. For what felt like endless minutes, they stayed there, frozen, trying to become invisible. When the sound finally faded, Elena still waited a little longer. Then she stood up, even as her body screamed, "Let's go! Now! Hurry!" They reached the tower. It was abandoned, but there was a makeshift water tank on the ground, surrounded by a wooden frame. Inside, they found a small emergency reservoir. Water. Dirty, but water. She soaked a cloth and wiped her sons' faces. She cried silently, because in that moment, surrounded by dust, fear, and sweat, they were alive. But the road wasn't over. That same afternoon, luck, or maybe fate, placed someone unexpected in their path. A man in a straw hat, riding a donkey, crossing the trail with several water jugs strapped to the saddle. Elena froze. So did the man. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other. He was local, weathered skin, tired eyes but kind. "Are you lost?" he asked, in Spanish. She hesitated, then nodded. "We're just looking for a safe place. We're a family. We don't want any trouble." The man dismounted, picked up a jug, and without a word, handed it to Javier. Then he looked at Matteo, worn out, and pulled a granola bar from his pocket. Keep heading north. There's an old station, about 2 hours from here. Don't stop." That was all he said before continuing on his way. Elena thanked him with her eyes. She didn't dare ask his name. In places like that, anonymity is protection. But she would never forget that gesture, because sometimes, in the middle of hell, someone still reaches out a hand. and that's enough. With renewed strength, they headed toward the station. They walked without stopping, step after step, as if each one might be their last. And when they finally saw the aging structure ahead, a wave of emotion and exhaustion swept over them. The station was worn down, but it had shade, a water fountain with lukewarm water, and most importantly, a public phone. Elena called an old acquaintance in Yuma, a retired man who had once helped her find odd jobs. He picked up on the third ring. Don Felipe. It's me, Elena. I'm with my boys. We're at a station in the desert. Can you come get us? There was a pause on the other end. Then he answered, Stay put. I'm coming right now. The hours that followed felt eternal. But when they saw a blue pickup kicking up dust in the distance, Elena fell to her knees. It wasn't the end of the fight, but it was the end of the desert. Don Felipe hugged each of them. Without asking questions, he helped them into the back of the truck and offered bread and juice. Javier and Mateo fell asleep on the ride. Elena didn't. She stared out the window like she had to make sure this was really happening. When they arrived at Felipe's house, a small plot of land on the outskirts of Yuma, Elena thanked him like someone who owed her life. You have no idea what this means. Of course I do, Elena. I was once the son of a woman like you. That night, for the first time in days, Elena slept in a bed, her sons beside her. No gunshots, no threats, no burning heat or bitter cold. Just the sound of crickets and the slow, steady breathing of two teenagers who were finally safe. But even there, she knew the hardest part was still ahead, because surviving the desert was only the first battle. Now came the invisible war, for stability, for permission to stay, for a life of dignity in a land that didn't yet know them. Elena stared up at the wooden ceiling and thought, if I made it this far, I can handle whatever comes next. And in her heart, a certainty. She would never again let anything or anyone threaten her children. The days following the crossing were a confusing mix of relief, fear, and new beginnings. Elena, Javier, and Mateo were now on American soil, sheltered at Don Felipe's modest property on the outskirts of Yuma, Arizona. It was a simple plot of land with a weathered wooden house, but inside, it held the most precious feeling of all, safety. For weeks, Elena kept her sons off the streets, tucked away inside the small shed Felipe used to store tools and old boxes. They turned it into a home. Blankets became dividers. Inflatable mattresses were donated by neighbors, and a gas burner was turned into a makeshift kitchen. It was precarious, but for the first time in a long while, it wasn't dangerous. Don Felipe helped however he could. An old Mexican man who had lived through nearly everything. He saw in Elena the same fight his own mother had once fought decades before. He charged them nothing, but gave her a warning. You need to fix your status soon. This place won't last forever. Elena knew that, and it haunted her every night. During the day, she worked off the books, doing laundry, cleaning houses, caring for the elderly. Any opportunity was welcome. Javier and Mateo, still teens, stayed home studying English with old books Don Felipe had stored away. They learned fast. They were smart, curious. And Elena felt pride swell in her chest every time she heard them talking to each other, in their rough, beginner's English, doing their best to belong to this new world. But fear was a constant shadow. All it took was a loud knock at the door, a helicopter overhead, a patrol car creeping by on the dirt road, and Elena's heart would race. Not for herself, for them, always for them. One day, while cleaning a house in a wealthier part of town, she was approached by the owner, a refined woman named Susan Miller. "Do you have children?" she asked, casually. Elena hesitated. She didn't know if she should answer, but something about that woman made her trust her. "Yes, 2 teenagers. They're with me now." Susan stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded with a faint smile. If you ever need help, let me know. I know people." Elena didn't reply, but those words echoed in her mind for days. The following week, Matteo had an asthma attack during the night. Panic took over. Elena, without health insurance and unsure where to go, rushed him to the emergency room at a public hospital. She signed her name with shaking hands, not knowing if she'd walk out of there with him or be taken away for good. But nothing happened. He was seen, treated, and released. And in that moment, Elena understood something. She couldn't live in hiding anymore. It was time to face reality. With Susan's help, she met a pro bono immigration lawyer specializing in humanitarian cases. His name was Michael Abrams, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a direct manner. Elena told him her full story, for the first time, in detail, through tears, long pauses, and painful truths. Michael listened to everything. At the end, he took a deep breath. "You have a strong case. We can try for humanitarian asylum. It'll take time, but it's possible." The word possible lit a new flame inside her. After so much rejection, so much fear, so much hopelessness, there was finally a chance. For months, they waded through the system. Paperwork, interviews, medical exams. Elena relearned how to be patient. And in the middle of it all, something even more beautiful began to happen. Matteo started excelling in math. Javier joined a local youth soccer team. And slowly, they began to rebuild the teenage years they had almost lost. One day, Javier came home smiling, waving a piece of paper. "I got into a technical program. Mom, they offer scholarships." She couldn't hold back the tears. She hugged him like he was still 5 years old. "You deserve this. You and your brother. You deserve everything." But not everything was easy. Their asylum request hit a roadblock. A letter of rejection nearly broke Elena. For days, she thought about giving up, about disappearing with her sons and living in the shadows. But Michael reminded her, "You crossed a desert for them, Elena. You're not stopping now." Those words stuck deep. Elena got back up. She brought Susan into the fight, who wrote a personal letter of recommendation. Don Felipe also wrote one, his handwriting shaky, telling how he had taken them in and how the boys had changed his life. The school sent transcripts and progress reports. Even the neighbors signed a petition. The community, quietly, began rallying around this woman no one knew deeply, but whom everyone respected. A mother who had never given up. And then, 2 years after the desert crossing, the news arrived by mail. Michael called her before she even opened the envelope. "They approved it. Elena, your application was accepted." The world froze for a few seconds. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, run to tell someone, or simply sit and give silent thanks. But when Javier and Matteo got home from school that day, she was waiting at the door, the letter in her hands and her eyes full of tears. "We're home, my sons. For real, this time." Their hug lasted for long minutes. The desert was behind them. The fear was gone. All that was left was life. Little by little, Elena began to build again. With papers in hand, she got a steady job. She rented a small house just for the 3 of them, bought second-hand furniture, painted the walls in soft colors, and hung a picture frame in the living room with a single handwritten phrase, "The hardest journey is the one love chooses to face." Javier is now studying engineering at a community college. Matteo wants to be a math teacher. And Elena is still a house cleaner, proudly. But now, with fair pay, legal protections, and guaranteed rights. More than that, she's a quiet symbol of courage in the community where she lives. Sometimes, at the market or at church, people she's never met walk up to her and say, "You're Elena, right? The mother of the boys who crossed everything for a better future. God bless you." She smiles, shyly. She's never seen herself as a hero, but deep down, she knows. She did what any brave mother would do, and on a sunny Sunday, While she was hosing down the backyard of their new home, she saw Javier sit beside her and ask something unexpected. "Mom, why did you do all that? Why did you risk so much?" She looked into his eyes with that same steady gaze that had guided him through the desert and answered without hesitation. "Because you were the one thing I couldn't lose. Everything I am is because of you." And in that moment, Javier understood something only time can teach. There is no greater force than a mother's love. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, then you understand what a mother is truly capable of when it comes to her children. Stories like Elena's happen every day, hidden behind humble doors, far from the spotlight. If you believe in the strength of a brave mother, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. It helps us keep sharing real stories, filled with love, resilience, and hope. And who knows, maybe the next one will remind you of your own mother.